As Mr. Inti then promptly referred to the financial and technological backing of the supposed investors of SMEL. And from then on, the 16 June 2017 letter no longer sounded as a request to sole source SMEL, but a pseudo request to sole source Cotecna SA, a supposed investor of SMEL. The copious reference by Mr. Inti to Cotecna SA and its notable technological acclaim was merely a ruse to divert attention from the glaring incapacity of SMEL in an attempt to directly influence the procurement process to obtain an unfair advantage for SMEL, notwithstanding its lack of experience and technological capability. Indeed, GRA failed to submit any evidence of a partnership or investment agreement between SMEL and Cotecna SA. The request merely attached the profiles of the two entities and a letter of intent from Cotecna SA. Further, nothing in Section 40 of the Public Procurement Act, which governs single-source procurement, operated in favor of the attempt to sole source SMEL to engage in revenue assurance on behalf of the Republic. Therefore, it came as no surprise that by a letter dated 4 July 2017, PPA communicated its disapproval of the 16 June 2017 request by GRA. PPA was emphatic that SML had no proven experience in the business it sought to undertake. Further, PPA stated that the letter of intent by Cotecna SA did not establish any legally binding relationship between SMEL and Cotecna for the provision of the service, and that the company seeking to be considered for a contract must demonstrate an appreciable capacity and strength of its own, and possibly subcontract a portion to a qualified subcontractor or agent, which was absent in the case. Second application by GRA to PPA. Then followed a second and stranger and more perplexing request by Mr. Inti, still as Acting Commissioner General of GRA, to PPA by a letter dated 1 August 2017, by which GRA applied for approval to sole source SMEL, and this time with Ghana Link. Cotecna was still in the picture somewhere. The request recited that SMEL had acquired a software for the classification, valuation, and risk management, that is CVRM platform, from Cotecna SA, and that SMEL had agreed to enter into a partnership with Ghana Link, a renowned local inspection and verification service provider, to provide the necessary support services for the implementation of the platform for GRA. A request further stated that in the partnership agreement, SMEL will provide a CVRM platform, while Ghana Link will provide external verification services using an appropriate platform, and that Ghana Link would also provide monitoring and supervision of customs valuation to ensure that the appropriate values were applied. The tone and tenor of the content of his own application should have portended pause and reflection on the part of Mr. Inti. In effect, he was stating that SMEL did not possess the requisite experience and track record, and no appreciable capacity and strength of his own. Yet, he was actively urging SMEL on PPA for approval merely 6 weeks after the PPA disapproval on the same ground. This was not reasonable persistence. It was a deliberate attempt to manipulate the procurement process, introduce a redundant private actor, and distort the facts and create a backdoor entry for SMEL into Ghana's revenue assurance architecture. This time, PPA did not even bother to respond, as the circumstances surrounding SMEL's lack of capacity and track record had not changed from the time of the rejection of the first application. Even more troubling was the fact that these CVRMs were being carried out by customs officers through the National Single Window Platform. Excuse me. Mr. Inti did not relent. He repeated a second application to PPA. Seeing that PPA had not responded to the second GRA application 6 weeks after the request was transmitted, and the powerful behind-the-curtain chief promoter, patron, and sponsor of SMEL, Mr. Ofori-Atta, was insistent on pushing the company into revenue assurance space through Mr. Inti. Mr. Inti repeated the second application by GRA to PPA for the sole sourcing of SMEL and Ghana Link by a letter dated 14 September 2017, which was almost word for word with the 1 August 2017 request. PPA certainly had had enough by this time, and it responded by a letter dated 29 September 2017 and rejected the second repeated GRA request. PPA forcefully stated that SMEL has still not shown any proven capacity in terms of experience and provision of similar assignments intended to be undertaken under the proposed joint venture agreement with Ghana Link. PPA also noted that the relationship between SMEL and Ghana Link did not provide the needed joint capacity to undertake the assignment, since SMEL would not be responsible for the bulk of the assignment by GRA's requirements. PPA signed off by stating that the reapplication by GRA did not address SMEL's lack of capacity in respect of the assignment. PPA did right in our estimation on all accounts on this matter up to this point. And with this, SMEL was blocked from the revenue assurance drive of GRA, or so it seemed. Now, SML. Following these setbacks, a simple but clever second plan was implemented to ensure that the company will certainly be awarded public procurement contracts for revenue assurance, come what may. On 22 November 2017, Strategic Mobilization Enhancement Limited, that was escaping me, SMEL, changed its name to Strategic Mobilization Ghana Limited, SML. Only the name changed. Everything else remained the same, including personnel and lack of expertise and capability. By a letter dated 30 November 2017, Mr. Eduse, the timber merchant, informed GRA of the name change while reserving the binding and full effect of all prior transactions. 7 months after the name change, GRA and MOF commenced the unlawful award to SML of a string of specialized revenue assurance public procurement contracts running into late 2023 in respect of transaction audits and external price verification, downstream petroleum, upstream petroleum, and the mineral sector. Contract for transaction audit services. After the name change from SMEL to SML, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of the company were actively looking for an opportunity to reintroduce the re-Christian company back into their design of awarding its public procurement contracts for revenue assurance, notwithstanding its lack of experience and capacity. The opportunity presented itself in the most unusual way through the enforced wresting of a public procurement contract from a company named West Blue Ghana Limited, through official accretional duress and browbeating. West Blue was incorporated in Ghana on 3 July 2012. It commenced business on 6 July 2012. Its core mandate, as stated in its object, is to facilitate trade reform and modernization programs with a particular focus on ICT implementation and management consultancy. By a contract dated 4 August 2015, the government of Ghana, acting through GRA and MOF, contracted West Blue for the provision of National Single Window Integrated Risk Management, NSWIRM, which entailed the delivery, installation, and maintenance of the project to enable GRA undertake core classification, valuation, and risk management functions of the destination inspection companies which were exiting the sector by 1 September 2015. Through this contract, West Blue became central to Ghana's trade facilitation and customs automation reforms until the contract's termination at the end of 2018, after which it became involved in legal disputes over outstanding payments and retained equipment. Members of the media, unbeknownst to West Blue, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML were eyeing its contract and devising means to dislodge it from the revenue assurance space and hand it over to SML. And by a letter dated 21 September 2017, authored by a company named Ports and Customs World Ghana Limited, and addressed to the Minister of Finance, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML saw an opening, and they promptly took it. By the 21 September 2017 letter, Ports and Customs World Ghana Limited informed MOF that it was to purchase and take over shares in West Blue, and that it was committed to renegotiating the terms of the West Blue contract dated 4 August 2015 with a more competitive price and improved technology. Citing value for money audit by Crown Agents Ghana Limited on the West Blue contract, which recommended the option of renegotiation of the contract to give GOG better value for money, MOF responded to Ports and Customs World Ghana Limited with deadly effect. By a letter dated 25 January 2018, MOF stated that it would terminate the West Blue contract on 31 December 2018. However, before the indicated termination, it was going to reduce its contract price. How a cited recommended option of a renegotiation of the contract was drastically elevated to termination of the contract can only be explained by one hypothesis, that the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML were setting the tone for the unlawful substitution of West Blue with SML without the required statutory prior approvals, and also that the reduction of the contract price payable to West Blue was not a cost-saving measure in the least, but a design with the sole purpose of withering it down, stifling it, and handing its contract over to SML. The public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML knew they could not simply replace West Blue with SML before the indicated termination date of 31 December 2018 of the West Blue contract because of contractual obligations. And more pressing was the reckoning that SML's involvement would trigger the requirement of mandatory prior statutory approvals. Indeed, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML dared not return to PPA at this time with a request for approval of SML's involvement, since the only thing that had changed about the company since the 29 September 2017 rejection by PPA was just the company's name. Therefore, these public actors of SML decided to place SML on the lap of West Blue and did in fact force SML on West Blue as its supposed subcontractor on the West Blue contract without the mandatory prior statutory approvals. Thus, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML commenced participation in a series of outright criminal conduct by knowingly disregarding and breaching criminal prohibitions backed by a sense of impunity, as they view themselves as all too powerful. First, by a contract dated 1 June 2018, entitled Transaction Audit Services Agreement, and with the parties as GRA, West Blue, and SML, the company, which was rightfully characterized by PPA as having no proven capacity in terms of experience and provision of similar assignments in the sector, was introduced as a supposed subcontractor of West Blue. The recitals of the contract stated that SML desired to perform and West Blue desired to have SML perform transaction audit services for and on behalf of West Blue in respect of the latter's contract for the implementation of the National Single Window Project, and that GRA had agreed to pay for the services of SML. The 1 June 2018 agreement was certainly not a result of West Blue's initiative, and its conduct after the execution of the contract showed that it did not welcome SML as its supposed contractor. Indeed, it was openly opposed to SML acting as its supposed subcontractor. This was not a case of one private entity subcontracting another private entity to carry out specialized services for it in respect of a public procurement contract. This was a forced peel away of West Blue's mandate under the 4 August 2015 contract and an unlawful donation of the cutout mandate to SML by the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML. Under the 1 June 2018 agreement, West Blue was not the client of SML. GRA was the client of SML, and it had the obligation to pay SML. SML's invoices for payment were to be submitted not through West Blue, but directly to GRA. The only contractual obligation placed on GRA was that it should pay SML's fees directly to SML. West Blue had no compensation obligation to SML, its supposed subcontractor. Indeed, to all practical and legal purposes, SML was not performing any services for West Blue. SML's purported services were directly for GRA and not indirectly through West Blue. The specific contractual involvement of GRA in this at once clever and not so clever arrangement rendered it a sole source public procurement contract which required prior PPA approval. However, PPA's prior approval was neither sought for nor obtained for this contract. This unlawfulness was perpetrated with the full knowledge and involvement of the Minister of Finance. The duration of the 1 June 2018 agreement was tied with the termination date of West Blue's mother contract. The contract required SML to provide transaction audit services of CCVRs generated and issued at the pre-arrival processing phase of the implementation of the National Single Window Project. Upon completion of the audit and the statement of its findings, SML was required to then forward the transaction audit reports together with all relevant attachments to the Customs Post-Clearance Audit, PCA officer, through data exchange protocols agreed with West Blue. The Customs PCA officer was then required to review the transaction audit reports and either accept or reject them. In fairness, it did sound like a contractor and subcontractor relationship on paper, under which the subcontractor was expected to apply skill, expertise, and tools. However, the reality was starkly different. SML did not provide any such skill, expertise, and tools under the contract. It merely sat on the skill, expertise, and tools of West Blue in a pretend posturing sham of delivering transaction audit services for the Republic. It became painfully clear a little over a month after the signing of the 1 June 2018 contract that SML had no skill, expertise, and tools of its own, and that West Blue had been forced into an unwanted marriage, which required it to shoulder the assumed primary obligations of SML. It was as if West Blue was rather the subcontractor for SML, as it was now being required to work for SML. By mid-July 2018, the tenuous and artificial relationship between West Blue and SML was falling apart, and by November 2018, the enforced partnership had collapsed, evidenced by a series of letters and emails exchanged between the two entities. SML, on its part, was perpetually vexed by West Blue's apparent stance of ignoring the former's repeated requests for information. West Blue, on the other hand, was registering its consternation at the forced marriage by supplying little or no information to SML in a silent protest of a demonstration that SML's participation was needless and downright odious, and that it had no skill, expertise, and tools of its own to function. These events forcefully established that the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML compelled West Blue to take on SML as a purported subcontractor, notwithstanding repeated rejections by PPA for lack of capacity, coupled with the absence of demonstrated operational need. The recurring unhappy friction between West Blue and SML underscores the fact that the former neither sought for nor welcomed the latter's involvement in its contractual dealings with the Republic, and that SML's entry unnecessarily disrupted the system of transaction audit and created an added layer of wasteful inefficiency in the sector. On 31 December 2018, and this date is very crucial, the 4 August 2015 West Blue contract for the provision of a national single window integrated risk management for the classification, valuation, and risk management in respect of imported goods terminated. So from 31st December 2018, West Blue had run out of a contract. On the same day, the 1 June 2018 Transaction Audit Services Agreement involving SML as the supposed contractor to West Blue under the latter's 4 August 2015 also terminated, since it was sitting on West Blue's mother contract. Upon the termination of the mother contract and its offshoot so-called subcontract on 31 December 2018, any reasonable person would have thought that if the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML were not criminally minded and were not engaged in criminality and were not intending to engage further in criminality, they would have naturally rolled out SML from the GRA revenue assurance drive and properly and lawfully given it an above-the-table chance in competition with like-minded entities. However, intending to further perpetrate criminality and to profit from same, they purported to extend SML's engagement without the subsistence of the mother West Blue contract. Later, they then purported to unlawfully include West Blue in the extended service when they faced the formidable challenge of the obvious, which is that SML could not operate without the expertise of West Blue, and that SML's participation could only be justified by them if that participation rode on the back of West Blue. Extension of contract for transaction audit services. The events commencing from 1 January 2019, after the 31 December 2018 expiration of the two contracts, were most troubling, as the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML doubled down on their criminal conduct with an enhanced sense of impunity. By a contract titled Contract Extension and dated 1 January 2019 and signed between GRA and SML, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML purported to extend the 1 June 2018 contract involving GRA, West Blue, and SML for a month, with the same terms and conditions in favor of SML. The striking feature of the contract extension was that it was executed without a corresponding renewal of West Blue's mother contract, upon which that contract sat, and upon which this new extension should have sat. The effect was that the contract extension sat on nothing, factually and legally. It stood alone in abject illegality and criminality without approval by PPA. Thus, on 1 January 2019, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML finally reached their intended and eventual goal, commenced in 2017, of their forcible entry of SML into the revenue assurance drive of GRA, with the successful dislodgement of West Blue and the donation of his contract to SML. Further, by not stipulating the specific duration of the contract, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML handed the company a potentially perpetual contract and thereby sought unsuccessfully to avoid the statutory requirement under Section 33(1) of the Public Financial Management Act 2016, Act 921, that provides a covered entity such as GRA should not enter into any agreement with a financial commitment that binds the government for more than one financial year, or that results in a contingent liability, as was the outlook of the contract, except where the financial commitment or the contingent liability is with the prior written approval of the Minister of Finance and authorized by Parliament in accordance with Article 181 of the Constitution. No sooner had this unlawful feat been attained than critical problems commenced their attendance on the new arrangement. SML still did not possess the skill, expertise, and tools to engage in transaction audit services, and it lacked a functioning system to receive and process CCVRs. And West Blue, upon whose tools and expertise SML relied to purport to perform the services, had been kicked out and was without a contract. Therefore, the public official promoters of SML decided on a short-lived but brutal course of bullying West Blue further into submission to hand over its work to SML when West Blue had no contract no longer with the state. So by a letter dated 10 January 2019, the Commissioner of the Customs Division of GRA, Isaac Krenzel, directed West Blue to cause the transfer of the transaction audit services for the top 20 imports to SML with effect from 11 January 2019. For added measure, Mr. Krenzel threw in a threat that if West Blue failed to cause the transfer, it will not be paid its outstanding fees for December 2018, and thereafter, for any month in which it failed to comply with the directive, forgetting that West Blue had exited the service and it no longer had a contract with the Republic. In that same letter, Mr. Krenzel advised SML to position itself by taking the necessary steps to take over the transaction audit services for the top 20 imports from West Blue. This letter was copied to the Minister of Finance, the Commissioner General of GRA, and the Chief Executive of SML. Then, by a letter dated 15 January 2019, West Blue responded to the directive by pointing out the obvious, that the 1 June 2018 arrangement between GRA, West Blue, and SML had expired on 31 December 2018, Nonetheless, it explained that it had been submitting the required information to SML, but that it encountered some challenges in the last quarter of 2018. This letter was also copied to the Minister of Finance, the Commissioner General of GRA, and the Chief Executive of SML. However, on the same day, and reeling under the intense bullying of the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML, and faced with the open threat by Mr. Krensel of the non-payment of his outstanding December 2018 fees should it fail to comply with the directive, West Blue handed over the transaction audit services for the top 20 imports between October and December 2018 to SML, not through any established system, but this time on a universal serial bus, USB drive. Upon receipt of West Blue's 15 January 2019 response, the public sponsors of SML upped their unlawful conduct. By a letter dated 23 January 2019 and addressed to the Chief Executive of West Blue, Mr. Krensel stated that though West Blue's contract with SML had expired on 31 December, he was advising West Blue to proceed under the same terms and effectively collaborate with SML until further notice. This letter was also copied to the Minister of Finance, the Commissioner General of GRA, and the Chief Executive of SML. This directive, dressed by way of an advice, blurred all good sense and the exercise of lawful authority. In effect, Mr. Krensel, by the 23 January 2019 letter, was seeking to effectively resurrect the expired 1 June 2018 contract involving GRA, West Blue, and SML, and by necessary extension, the terminated West Blue mother contract of 4 August 2015 to the benefit of the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML. Our conclusion becomes even more telling on the consideration that upon retirement as the Commissioner of the Customs Division of GRA, Mr. Krensel took up appointment as the General Manager of SML, coloring his actions while in office as an inducement for future reward of a retirement benefit and use of public office for private benefit. Contract for additional services, external verification. The public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML then proceeded to firmly entrench the company in the public revenue assurance space by once again mounting another contract upon a contract which was itself based on nothing. So by a contract dated 1 April 2019 between GRA and SML, recited as made pursuant to the 1 January 2019 contract extension, GRA appointed SML to provide external services to Customs Technical Services Bureau, CTSB. This contract was reckless by all accounts, as it was executed and implemented at a time when SML still did not possess the capacity, experience, and expertise to perform the services it was originally engaged to deliver. It beats the imagination then that the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML added on additional services in respect of which the company had absolutely no skill, expertise, experience, and capacity. It was a case of more money for no work, and much like the 1 January 2019 contract, the 1 April 2019 contract was bedeviled by all the unlawfulness of the absence of statutory prior approvals by PPA and Parliament. Now, having estimated that SML had been cleaned up enough to gain acceptance by July 2019, the chief public official promoter, sponsor, and patron of SML, Mr. Ofori-Atta, commends a more direct involvement in the company's activities and interface with public institutions to secure more public contracts for the company, and also to ensure that its path to that attainment was well cleared and smoothened. On the instructions of Mr. Ofori-Atta, the technical advisor ICT at MOF, by an email dated 16 July 2019, invited the controlling mind of West Blue to a meeting with Mr. Ofori-Atta at the boardroom of the Minister of Finance, slated for 17 July 2019. On 17 July 2019, Mr. Ofori-Atta hosted SML and West Blue in his office, and at that meeting it was resolved that West Blue should reactivate its web service to SML by transmitting all CCVR data in respect of January to June 2019. Now, during all this period, Mr. Ofori-Atta's increased participation in personally promoting the cause of SML had become pronounced. On 29 August 2019, he directed his technical advisor through his chef de cabinet, Mr. Enesakori, to lead the integration of West Blue and SML alongside the new leadership of the Customs Technical Services Bureau. Mr. Ofori-Atta was being copied in every email chain, and this is highly significant because as Minister of Finance, he was placed in direct knowledge of SML's operational and tool incapacity, and that it was hardly performing any service to deserve the payment of fees. Had he not been personally benefiting from SML's unlawfully procured contracts, the open display by SML of lack of capacity, expertise, and tools would have immediately triggered his intervention to halt payments to SML and demand accountability. Instead, he looked on conspiratorially in silence, while endorsing and approving payments to SML from the Consolidated Fund, Petroleum Revenue Account, and Tax Refund Account, with no technical or operational basis. The OSP investigation shows that all the troubleshooting displayed during this period was born of the unlawful imposition of SML in the space and the still lingering reality of SML's lack of capacity to carry out transaction audits and external price verification, 15 months after its engagement. The company had no system in place to receive CCVRs, while West Blue was under no legal obligation to release the vital data to it. As a result, the work went undone until SML continued, and it went undone, yet SML continued to be paid. It is highly worrisome that though SML were doing practically nothing by way of transaction audits and external price verification, GRA kept authorizing steady payments to the company. The OSP investigation shows that the 1 June 2018 contract involving GRA, West Blue, and SML, the 1 January 2019 contract extension between GRA and SML, and the 1 April 2019 contract for additional services between GRA and SML were of no real benefit to the Republic and an unnecessary drain on the public purse. Indeed, all the way into May 2021, SML was displaying its incapacity by seeking integration into the transaction audit and external price verification systems by 2 requests, one dated 12 May 2021 and 15 May 2021. At this point, on 20 September 2019, MOF, by a press release, announced that Mr. Nti would retire, and along came in the Reverend Amishadai Owusu Amwa. Consolidation of Services Agreement, Transaction Audit, and External Verification Services. I'm winding down a bit. This is important. From October 2019, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML enhanced the unlawful conduct to a frightening degree. On 3 October 2019, 2 agreements were signed. GRA and SML signed a contract for the consolidation of transaction audit services and external verification services. The previous standalone contracts, which were masqueraded as piecemeal and of very short durations, were merged and enhanced with a duration of 5 years with the option of renewal. The OSP investigation shows that SML did not submit a single invoice in respect of this contract and under its predecessor standalone contracts. In addition, SML did not transmit the required reports to the CTSB and PCA officers. Nonetheless, GRA kept a constant stream of automatic payments to SML under this contract and under its predecessor standalone contracts. Consequently, the unlawful strategic investiture of SML in the public revenue assurance space became a windfall of automatic payments detached from the performance of actual work and without monitoring and verification. On the same day, the second contract was signed with SML for the measurement audit of downstream petroleum products. This referenced the previous contracts, including the one signed on the same day, that having regard to the expertise of SML in providing transaction audit service, the services being rendered by SML to GRA was being extended to operations within the downstream petroleum sector. Upon this official falsehood, SML was handed another contract to undertake a comprehensive review of workflow and operations within the downstream uploading and offloading points. The OSP investigation shows that the contract for measurement audit of downstream petroleum products was an unnecessary parallel layer since the service was already being performed satisfactorily by NPA, that's the National Petroleum Authority, and customs officials. Also, SML's measuring system was unsuitable for measurements at several depots, rendering its services of no import in respect of those depots. NPA was quite concerned, and it promptly anticipated the clear and present danger of duplication. However, the official promoters of SML were not interested in whatever measures NPA, as the state regulator in the industry, had instituted or was about to institute. The multi-term of 5 years duration of these contracts also bound the government to financial commitments for more than a year and resulted in a contingent liability, and also triggered the requirement for ministerial approval and authorization by Parliament. The OSP investigation did not uncover a prior written approval by the Minister of Finance of the 3 October 2019 contracts. However, Mr. Ofori-Atta's involvement in the procurement of the contracts by his actions show that he firmly approved of the contracts, even if not in writing. Excuse me. Therefore, if the claim in his defense is that he did not write to approve the contracts, and so he bears no criminal culpability, then it is the worst form of dereliction of duty, as the contracts were secured under his direct watch and supervision, and he subsequently wrote to 3 state institutions, GNPC, Ministry of Lands and Forestry, and the Ministry of Energy, falsely touting the unique expertise of SML under those contracts. On the other hand, if the claim is that Mr. Ofori-Atta was unaware of the execution of those contracts, then it is a debased form of willful blindness for the same reasons. The OSP investigation established that there was no parliamentary authorization for these contracts either. Further, and very troubling, both contracts were signed by Mr. Inti on behalf of GRA on 3 October 2019, although he had retired on 1 October 2019, and Reverend Owusu-Amoah had assumed office as acting GRA Commissioner General on 1 October 2019. This wanton illegality, after signing a public procurement contract 2 days after retirement, was perpetrated by these public promoters of SML by ensuring that their co-conspirator, Mr. Inti, signed the contracts before clearing his desk at GRA, although he was no longer the Commissioner General on that day, because they were unsure of whether the newly installed Reverend Minister Head of GRA would team play and sign the contracts. They need not have worried. This is because Reverend Owusu-Amoah quickly joined in on the conspiracy to unlawfully invest SML in the Public Revenue Assurance Project. By the close of 2018, the government has served notice that it was about to introduce Integrated Customs Management System, ICAMS, and that it was discontinuing the services of all the players in the industry in the customs setup. This notice had been circulated to all the players except SML. Now, the reason why they did not serve this notice on SML, which later came back to haunt SML, was that they had no intention of discontinuing the service of SML, although the government, through a letter authored by the senior minister, Yao Safubanfu, on 16 April 2020, notified the companies that the new system would take off the midnight preceding 20 April 2020, and from which date all customs processes would take place within ICAMS. He then invited the companies, including SML, to submit any justifiable claims they may be entitled to following the discontinuation of their service. It is evidently clear that as far as the government itself was concerned, the purported services of SML in the customs setup ended on 28 April 2020. Not so with the public official sponsors, patrons, and promoters of SML. In June 2020, by which time Reverend Owusu-Amoah had fully joined the conspiracy, as he had assumed office on 1 October 2019, but without seeing a single invoice backed by a verified report from SML in respect of transaction audit and external price verification services, he was happily signing off and supervising automatic payments to SML. PPA ratification of the 3 October 2019 SML contracts. By a letter dated 28 July 2020, the Commissioner General of GRA requested PPA to ratify the October 2019 dual contracts. Crucially, Reverend Owusu-Amoah failed to disclose that in 2017, his predecessor had unsuccessfully thrice presented the company to PPA under a different name, SMEL, which had just been switched to SML. PPA set up an investigation team the next day with the object of investigating the circumstances under which the contracts were procured without the prior approval of PPA, and the authoring of a report to assist the PPA board to process the GRA's request. The least said about the PPA investigation, the better. The OSP investigation shows that the investigation was shallow and incomplete, and the resultant report was outrightly misleading in parts. Though they had SML's incorporation records before them, the PPA investigators ignored that and rather chose to focus on the objects, Though they had SML's incorporation records before them, the PPA investigators chose to ignore that and rather focus on the application for ratification by the Commissioner General of GRA. Had the PPA investigators paid the slightest regard to PPA's own record of GRA and SML, it would have occurred to them to inquire as to why a company incorporated in 2017 and serially rejected by PPA in 2017 was nonetheless handed the same and additional contracts of grave national import in 2018. In the end, a PPA investigation merely seemed like a box-ticking formality as the investigators ignored PPA's own records on the transaction file of GRA and SML. And they submitted to the board a recommendation that the contracts should be ratified. Now, the Board Technical Committee meeting of PPA, which was held on 26 August 2020, deliberated on the investigation report and approved this recommendation. It seems to us that the PPA board itself was overwhelmed with such requests for ratification, as that was one of 7 applications considered that day. They expressed the grave concern that it had become the norm that public agencies were going ahead of themselves by awarding sole sourcing contracts before coming to PPA for ratification. By a letter dated 27 August 2020, the acting chief executive of PPA communicated to the Commissioner of GRA that PPA had ratified GRA's decision to single source SML to provide consultancy services for transaction audit, external verification, and measurement of downstream petroleum products. Now, the effect of the PPA ratification. Generally, PPA ratification of covered contracts procured without approval does not absolve implicated persons of responsibility of their actions, except where the procurement of the contract was unavoidable in the peculiar circumstances. The OSP investigation is focused on criminal conduct in the context of corruption and corruption-related offenses. On this score, in the province of the criminal law, PPA ratification of covered contracts procured without prior approval does not erase criminal conduct, and it does not extinguish criminal culpability. And this is especially so in respect of the inchoate offenses of attempt and conspiracy to commit any of the prohibited acts described under Section 92 of the Public Procurement Act. The OSP investigation shows that the public official sponsors of SML conspired to directly and indirectly influence the procurement process to obtain an unfair advantage in the award of the various procurement contracts to SML, contrary to Section 23(1) of the Criminal Offences Act and Section 92(2)(b) of the Public Procurement Act. And they went beyond this to commit acts in furtherance of the conspiracy. That is to say, they agreed to act together with a common purpose to directly and indirectly influence the procurement process to obtain an unfair advantage in the award of the various procurement contracts to SML. These acts are unaffected by PPA ratification in the sense that in our criminal jurisprudence, the crime of conspiracy was committed the moment the words of agreement were spoken by these public official actors, whether with or without previous consent or deliberation. Therefore, nothing in the form of a ratification of the procurements can affect that. Further, this was not a case of unavoidable procurement of SML. This was a coldly calculated conspiracy to defy PPA after the 2017 rejections of the company by awarding it with the procurement contracts anyway, notwithstanding these grave concerns raised by PPA about its lack of capacity, expertise, and experience. Then again, the PPA ratification did not cure the absence of the quite distinct mandatory authorization by Parliament. Thus, the contract still stood in illegality. Then came the contract for consolidation of revenue assurance services, upstream petroleum audit. This is the last one, and we are winding down. I'm tiring you down. It's on purpose to punish you. After running SML unlawfully alongside ICAMS and unnecessarily, illegally inserting the company in the downstream petroleum revenue assurance model for 2 years, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML rolled out their biggest and final act aimed at imposing SML as the sole entity to undertake revenue assurance through a deliberate and coordinated plot spearheaded directly by Mr. Ofori-Atta himself and reinforced by his chef de cabinet, Mr. Akori, and Reverend Usuamwa. The plan was to consolidate the unlawfully procured revenue assurance contracts and enhance the largesse further to SML by awarding it with upstream petroleum audit and mineral audit services. I'm sparing us all a bit of time. Now, the present status of transaction audit and external price verification services. The OSP investigation shows that the total fees paid to SML under the transaction audit and external price verification contracts amount to 506,728,334 cedis, 21 pesos, between July 2018 and December 2024. These payments were effected automatically, contrary to the terms of the various contracts, without reference to actual work done, and without the submission by SML of reports to the PCA and CTSB units for verification, and without the submission of invoices by SML, notwithstanding the reality that SML performed very minimally or at all by way of these contract services. The status of downstream petroleum audit. It will be recalled that the measurement audit for downstream petroleum agreement was one of 2 contracts unlawfully signed by Mr. Inti on 3 October 2019 as Commissioner General of GRA, though he retired on 1 October 2019. SML was required to develop and implement an end-to-end electronic metering management system dedicated solely to fiscal measurement aimed at loss prevention. by deploying very accurate computerized fiscal metering system, identifying quantities of petroleum products delivered to the bulk distribution center depots per day and month. Excuse me. The OSP investigation shows that SML's participation in downstream petroleum audits was unnecessary, and that its monthly audit reports were unreliable, as its metering system was unsuitable for the design of the pipes at several depots. Further, SML could not integrate into ICAMS and the MPA system, that's the ERDMS. Therefore, it was compelled to resort to way-bill scanning at some point as a substitute for end-to-end electronic monitoring. Notwithstanding these known inhibiting factors, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML continued to disburse substantial sums of public funds to the company. In early September 2020, SML submitted its first audit report for July, August, and September 2020. The company claimed in the report that it had observed a sharp increment in petroleum products lifting of the depots at which it had installed its metering system commencing from May 2020, when it deployed its meters to measure lifted volumes. In addition, it stated that its readings for the period were about the same as that of MPA, and that this attested to the fact that its readings were reliable and could be depended on for the revenue assurance processes. Further, the company claimed that the pattern of increase could be attributed to the effective monitoring by the introduction of its electronic meter monitoring system and the vigilance of customs officers. This report drew a sharp rebuttal from the Commissioner of Customs Division of GRA, Colonel Damois retired. By a letter dated 3 September 2020 and addressed to SML, he stated, "Your report on revenue savings has been considered. However, we are unable to accept conclusively that the growth in revenue is a result of the installation of meters by SML." Notwithstanding this remarkable awareness of SML's false claims, Colonel Damois neither recommended suspension nor insisted on remedial action, and he participated in the contrived system of unjustifiable payments to SML, even when further evidence of SML's technological incapacity came to his attention in April 2021 through the service provider for ICAMS. SML continued its fantastically false claims into early 2021. It then continued its claims of being indispensable in the industry all the way through 2022. However, in the first half of 2023, SML was made to confront reality. It changed its tone in its audit reports as a result of design unsuitability problems discovered in respect of its meters, and that corrective measures were required for accurate readings. The language in its June 2023 audit report was subdued. It declared that the volumes declared in ICAMS tallied with that recorded by SML. From August 2023 running into 2025, its language became contrite and restitutive, as now the ICAMS volumes began outstripping SML's readings. Members of the media, the OSP investigation shows that SML's meters were Honeywell VersaFlow TWS 9000W multipath ultrasonic flow meters. And according to the Ghana Standards Authority, which is the custodian of weights and measures, these meters are attractive for measurements in the oil and gas industry because of their non-intrusive clamp-on installation, which does not require welding or cutting, and that the use of these meters ensures high accuracy as opposed to single-path ultrasonic flow meters. However, on SML's own showing from its audit report from August 2023, added to an operational shortfall of not having fixed meters in at least 5 depots, its metering system was encountering substantial physical and operational challenges in a good number of the depots, resulting in inability of measurements tabled as follows. 1. SML's meters were unable to measure residual fuel oil because the temperature and fluid viscosity were too high for clamping and performance of ultrasonic flow meters. 2. SML did not measure volumes at depots that load products at atmospheric pressure using natural gravity because ultrasonic flow meters are unsuitable for work in such conditions. 3. SML did not measure volumes at depots where flows of petroleum products go through underground pipelines, since it was physically impossible to clamp the meters on underground pipelines. To address some of these concerns, SML perennially expressed the intention of installing an automatic tank gauging system. It fixed 8 out of 29 depots. The OSP investigation also discovered that a high discrepancy in readings that SML kept reporting from June 2020 through December 2022 was largely due to SML's meters reading vibrations and sounds from trucks as they discharged petroleum products at night. Further, the meters sometimes recorded pressurized water used in washing the pipes and driving products through the pipes. The OSP investigation shows that the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML were fully aware of the acute shortfall of SML service in the downstream petroleum sector, yet they persisted in their patronage by permitting it to operate and religiously authorizing payments to it while they remained in a lethargic state of willful blindness. This could only have been for their private benefit. Indeed, as recently as January 2025, SML was exhibiting inability of comprehending the loading process through ERDMs and ICAMs. This was evidenced in a letter dated 17 January 2025 by the head of petroleum operations at GRA addressed to the managing director of SML. In respect of the upstream petroleum and minerals audit, it didn't take off as a result of the presidential directive for suspension and as a result of the OSP investigation. A central issue arising from the automatic payments by GRA to SML in respect of downstream petroleum audit is that GRA, the Central Tax Authority, failed to deduct statutory taxes totaling 13,380,000 cedis. GRA subsequently, in July 2024, offset this tax component. However, the penal component of 18,800,000 cedis remain outstanding. In addition, there is an outstanding pay-as-you-earn tax liability of 346,967 cedis, 53 pesos. Now I'm coming to an end. The KPMG audit and the OSP investigation. We recall that while OSP's preliminary findings accorded with the major factual findings in the KPMG report, the OSP found itself unable to agree with some major conclusions drawn by KPMG, especially in respect of accountability and value for money. This is because the OSP investigation shows that the KPMG report was placatory in material respects, as it sought to beatify SML by ignoring the fact that it did not possess independent reconciliation algorithms and audit tools, and that it was plying its purported trade alongside ICAMs and ERDMS without adding any real value to the products of these established processes. Indeed, the causal relationship KPMG sought to draw between improvements in the downstream petroleum audit sector and SML services was non-existent. The OSP agrees with KPMG on its conclusion that there was no specifically commissioned and purpose needs assessment report. However, KPMG's narrative on contracting methodology did not quite examine SML's incapacity at inception. In respect of transaction audit and external price verification services, KPMG concluded that SML delivered partially and that GRA may not have obtained all the expected benefits from the services. KPMG based this conclusion on its observation that SML submitted some of the expected reports and that in respect of some, it sources data from wrong documents. However, the OSP found no verifiable evidence of the said reports in GRA's records or in the records of SML as having been transmitted to PCA and CTSB for verification. Further, the PCA unit confirmed during the OSP investigation that no such report came to its attention. Then again, there was no critical examination as to the substantive quality and validity of the said reports referred to by KPMG. Indeed, KPMG's own officials who attended the OSP during the investigation failed to substantiate the claim of partial delivery when they were questioned by OSP officials. They could not provide any documentary evidence to show up their own claims. Then, there is the payment methodology which tells a different story, which is that GRA was paying SML automatically without the submission by SML of a single invoice backed by verified reports. In respect of measurement audit for downstream petroleum, KPMG concluded that there was reported incremental volume that is attributable to the involvement of SML determined at 1.70 billion liters for the period, which translates to incremental revenue of 2.5 billion cedis attributable to the involvement of SML. The OSP firmly disagrees with this conclusion by KPMG. Indeed, the OSP investigation shows that KPMG relied heavily on trend analysis of petroleum lifting volumes between 2018 and 2013, and not so much on the actual work done by SML, and without much consideration of the impact of the concurrent implementation of ERDMS and ICAMS during that period. These systemic upgrades surely accounted for much more accountability and records of lifting volumes. KPMG later contradicted itself in its own report by acknowledging that revenue growth in this period resulted from macroeconomic factors such as pricing and demand, and regulatory enforcement and increased taxes. In any case, the OSP investigation shows that SML's participation in downstream petroleum audit was unnecessary, and that its monthly audit reports were unreliable. As I stated, its metering system was unsuitable for the design of the pipes and operational modes at several depots. Post-KPMG audit. Following the KPMG audit, MOF, GRA, and SML acted on the KPMG recommendation of the consideration of shifting from a variable to a fixed fee structure in respect of downstream petroleum products audit. So by a memorandum of understanding signed on 1 November 2024, they changed the variable fee mechanism to a monthly fixed fee of 22,629,204 cedis 95 pesos, being, they stated, equivalent of 1,432,228 United States dollars 16 cents, inclusive of all taxes, at the prevailing Bank of Ghana exchange rate, which operated on 1st October 2024. In our estimation, the CD version of the stated fixed monthly fee in the 1 November 2024 addendum is unnecessarily deceptive, as the parties' real intention as captured in Clause 13 of the MOU itself is a monthly fee of the stated figure in United States dollars. GRA has not paid SML since December 2024 as a result of the OSP investigation. And ladies and gentlemen of the press, action in respect of key actors. The outcome of the investigation is that the OSP will charge the following persons with various corruption and corruption-related offenses before the end of November 2025. 1. Kenneth Nanayao Ofori-Atta, former Minister of Finance. 2. Ernest Akori, Chef de Cabinet to Kenneth Nanayao Ofori-Atta as Minister of Finance. 3. Emmanuel Kofi-Nti, former Commissioner General of Ghana Revenue Authority. 4. Amishadai Owusu-Amoah, former Commissioner General of Ghana Revenue Authority. 5. Isaac Krentzel, former Commissioner of the Customs Division of Ghana Revenue Authority and General Manager of Strategic Mobilization Ghana Limited. 6. Kwejo Damwa, former Commissioner of the Customs Division of Ghana Revenue Authority and Member of Parliament for German South constituency. As part of the process, the OSP will seek to recover the financial loss caused to the Republic from the persons listed above. Also, the OSP will recover a total amount of 125 million cedis from SML by way of a disgorgement of unjust enrichment of overpayment by the return of the benefit of this amount it obtained unfairly at the expense of the Republic. This amount was arrived on two considerations. First, the participation of SML in the public revenue assurance regime was based on largely undeserved automatic payments detached from performance. Second, the figure was adjusted on a quantum meru basis. This is a legal doctrine that developed the English common law as a form of implied contract or quasi-contract to ensure that the person who conferred a benefit on another received compensation, even when no valid contract existed. The courts introduced the doctrine as an equitable remedy to prevent unjust arrangement, recognizing that fairness sometimes required payment, even without an enforceable agreement. In the present context, the OSP configured the doctrine in respect of adjusting the fair value of the investments made by SML in pursuance of performing its obligations under the various contracts, even where the contracts were procured unlawfully and even where services were minimally performed or not performed at all, on the back of SML's reasonable expectations created under the various contracts which were awarded to it by high-ranking public officials who represented ostensible authority and statutory and regulatory compliance to that private company. The investments include the setting up and maintenance of 2 offices by SML, one in Accra and the other in Tema, the hiring of employees, the payment of employees' salaries and attendant statutory payments, the acquisition of vehicles, the acquisition of and installation of ultrasonic meters and automatic tank gauges, and the procurement of a transaction value assessment system, TVAS. I have 2 very short recommendations, and I bring it down. The circumstances surrounding the enforced insertion of SML in the nation's quest for increased revenue were regrettable, unlawful conduct, and reckless financial decision-making. Indeed, this was a case of unnecessary and wasteful pretend revenue assurance, except for comparison purpose only. Even then, the basis of the supposed comparison was a collection of disappearing acts of no worthy utility. And even now, some officers of GRA are issuing letters and statements along the lines of the pretense that this has been worthwhile for the nation. Such statements are feeble attempts at face saving, and they do not operate to extinguish the criminal culpability of the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML. However, there is much wisdom and force in the institution of real revenue assurance, as it involves the identification, prevention, and correction of revenue leakages, thereby enhancing the public purse. In the estimation of the OSP, GRA did right by finally terminating the transaction audit and price and external price verification aspects of SML's engagement in November 2024. The OSP recommends that that termination should be made to lie where it fell, as SML showed a classless non-performance of the service it was unlawfully engaged to perform in the sector. Further, the OSP can neither choose nor recommend contractual partners for public institutions. Therefore, if in the estimation of MOF and GRA, they are desirous of retaining SML in other areas of revenue assurance, then critical needs assessment should be performed, and the ministry and its regulatory agency must ensure that all statutory and regulatory prior approvals and licenses are obtained, and further, that contractual obligations are mounted on expertise, experience, and capability based on responsible value for money verification and monitoring constructs. The OSP highly commends Evans Eziamo Mensah, Ajua Adubia Owusu, and Manase Azuri Awuni. We are very grateful for your service. Ghanaians, thank you. Extradition matters. It would occur to you in my submission that the main suspect in respect of the concluded SML investigations is the former finance minister, or a former finance minister, Kenneth Nanayao Ofori-Atta. We recall that in February, the OSP declared him a fugitive from justice and placed him on our list of wanted persons. The OSP drew a lot of flack that we were going after a very sick person. But our intel told us And we very well knew, and we kept insisting and telling Ghanaians that he just did not want to come into the country voluntarily to answer to these charges. We did not relent, even in the face of the negativity. We went ahead. When we relaxed, placing him on the list of wanted persons on representations that he may show up at a certain time, some members of the public took it as weakness in us. Although what we were doing was that if a person says that they are so ill that they cannot show up, you grant them that regard for them to heal before they come in. But on his own stated date, he failed to show up, whereupon we placed him back on the list of wanted persons. Then we drew more negative flack that we were talking too much. But all that time, we knew exactly what we were doing because our intelligence was solid, that this person just didn't want to come to the country voluntarily. By March of 2025, we had collected all the evidence that we needed to aid in the prosecution of this matter. However, two things were outstanding. One, we needed official verification of a lot of the items that we had intercepted, especially in respect of communication. And this will require the input of our major foreign partners. Indeed, the packet arrived on Monday in validation of what we had way back in March. Then, early June, I think it was 10 June, we carried out further searches and seizures at two offices of SML, one in Accra in Osu and one in Tema. And there we retrieved computer servers and hard drives that had to be subjected to forensic examination. This work is not done overnight. And it is upon this reason that we informed the Attorney General when we kick-started the extradition process that the dockets had not been bound up yet because we were waiting for something. At the OSP, we do not talk lightly. We knew what we were waiting for, and we have them fully now. We have uncovered all that is contained on the computer servers and the hard drives. And now on Monday, with the gracious assistance of our major foreign partner, we have the validation of the evidence that we had way back in March 2013. So, on 2nd June 2020, we triggered the extradition request because by March, as we said, we had all the evidence we needed. We only needed official validation of them. And that is why we triggered the extradition request on 2nd June 2020 through the Chief of Staff. The past few weeks, we are once again drawing negative flack that we who put him on our list of wanted persons, that the OSP that declared him wanted, that the OSP that declared him a fugitive from justice, that the OSP that went to Interpol in record time of 48 hours and placed him on Interpol's red notice, we were stalling the case and that we were wasting time. But once again, as I said, we knew what we were doing and we knew what we were waiting for. And last week, when the Attorney General addressed the media, he said something very poignant. He said, these financial investigations require time and patience. And we ask, give us that regard of time and patience. We will deliver the results we wanted, like this. And as I said, before the expiration of November 2025, we will charge all these persons that I listed before the criminal courts. we will not stultify our own investigations. We will not delay our own investigations. We would do it right. We will be patient. We will be meticulous. We would have all the expertise in the world examine all, because we only have one shot at these criminal cases. We cannot go back, forth with it. And so, I announce to you, as we did by way of our press statement last week, that we are in full collaboration with the Attorney General's Department. We cannot work against each other. We are working for the same cause, which is the cause of the Republic of Ghana. And we cannot be at loggerheads. We cannot be in dispute. Sometimes, personalities and how one wants to do something may clash a bit, but that should not be taken as dispute or disagreement. Many of you do not know my relationship with the Attorney General. He is like a big brother to me. He taught me at Legon, and he also was part of my training. Indeed, we formed a firm together. And indeed, I was like his foreman even when he was putting up his first building in Accra. This is our relationship. The relationship is such that because he trained me and he taught me, I have a bit of him in me. He doesn't have a bit of me in him. And so sometimes my display of his bit in me stirs him up a bit. But at the end of the day, just as we were doing in private practice, we will bicker at home. But our product, when we finally churn it out, will be most robust and most fruitful. And this is our promise to Ghana, that we are working together. We cannot but work together. And we are going to work together in full collaboration, see to the end of this matter. Semu wa sembisa eye. Munya sembisa swa eye pa was my bread. I knew he would go, because today Elton is not here, so he will go.
Thank you very much. My name is Ibrahim Hassan. I work with G20. Yes, you've taken time to assure all of us and for that matter, the country, that you have a very beautiful working relationship with the Attorney General. Right. Now, as we heard and was widely circulated last week, there was a request that was made of your office relative to a docket. Per what we gather, maybe it's the use of semantics. Maybe if it had been an investigative report, the story would have been different. What do you say to that? And somebody just sent me a message to ask you that if Ken Ofori-Atta applies and obtains a U.S. citizenship, what becomes of your case against him?
You think I remember all this? Okay.
Right, my name is Mawina with TV3. With respect to the investigations that the office has been undertaking with respect to Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta, I know that the SML is one of such investigations which the Office of the Special Prosecutor said it was engaged in. Does this mean the others have come to an end, if we can call it that, or these other investigations are running concurrently, even as you say that you're going to proceed and charge Ms. Ofori-Atta? With respect to the docket, the conversation was that it had not been submitted. You've just told us that the final piece of confirmation you were waiting for arrived on Monday. Does this mean that, is there a timeline with which you can give us that you're going to submit this docket now to the Attorney General, because there's quite a lot of interest with respect to that as well?
See, people are really interested in the docket, as it should be.
Thank you very much. My name is Ernest Bako from Business and Financial Times.
Ernest what?
Bako from Business and Financial Times. So, I know you've done some cases in the past, most of them being plea bargain. So I want to find out, apart from Ofori-Atta, we have about 5 other people. They are currently in the country, I hope. And so, will you continue? You made mention by end of November you file. Will you continue with these people's case, or you wait until you are able to bring Ken Ofori-Atta in? And will you also be doing plea bargain with these cases, or will see some people go behind bars? Thank you very much.
Sorry, I didn't get the last part. You sort of swallowed it.
I said I wanted to know if you will see these people going behind bars.
After plea bargain, you said something about them.
Or will we see them behind bars?
Oh.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. See, the first person who has the question who got it right. It's really about semantics. See, extradition requires a lot of complex dealings. You know, why is it going through the Attorney General? It's because the Attorney General is the central authority when it comes to these things. In some matters, the Minister of Foreign Affairs is the central authority. So if the Attorney General wasn't the central authority and we could just go, we would have just gone. The Attorney General is not the only in the chain. When it goes through, it goes through our mission and it comes all the way back around to us because we initiated the process. It is unfortunate that there is talk about we have been asked for a docket and we have refused to give the docket and all. That is beside the point. That is not the issue at all. The issue is that you need to get it right the first time. You don't keep going back and forth. You need to get it right the first time. So when on 13 June we responded to the Attorney General and we said that the docket is not yet boarded up, we meant exactly that. Now someone asked about timelines and all. That's not how we do these sensitive cases, to give timelines in the public domain, especially as the final decision will not be taken by the OSP. The final decision will not be taken by the Attorney General. The final decision will be taken by whichever foreign jurisdiction in which he is. U.S. citizenship. If he applies and obtains U.S. citizenship, we have been giving Ghanaians to the U.S. on extradition requests. And they will also be nice to give us U.S. citizens upon request. So the citizenship status does not prevent extradition. Only that when a person is a citizen of another country, it is more difficult to extradite the person to a foreign country. But we'll still move on with the processes and ensure that Ghanaians become less restive and appreciative of the issues and the work we are doing with the Attorney General. Wait or continue. We are not waiting for anyone. I said we are filing our charges, and Director of Prosecutions has promised me, because I'm expecting his charges tomorrow. And then I'll review. It takes a while, because when it goes from the investigative setup to and the asset recovery setup to me, then to him. Now the baton is with him now. He is anchoring on the third leg, and he will finally give it to me tomorrow. And then we'll file. So, see, I said before the end of November, we will file. We are not waiting for anyone. Persons can be tried in absentia. You've seen it before. You can be sentenced in absentia anytime we find you in the jurisdiction, we can then proceed to apply the processes based on how it ended. Plea bargain, or see them behind bars. And so on. See, the OSP legal regime is set up to give the special prosecutor a lot of discretion when it comes to what happens to cases. That discretion is based on tabulated legal principles of what the special prosecutor should consider in respect of whether the case should go to a full trial or whether it should go by way of plea bargain. But the OSP does not suggest plea bargain to accused persons. That's not what we do. You suggest, so oftentimes their lawyers will write to us that they would want to go by way of plea bargain. They will then come and meet my team. They will discuss at length. And then when the matter is placed before me, I would go through what the law says and what they've brought by way of proposal to see if, in this case, it requires that we go to a full trial or it requires that we go by way of plea bargain. Now, if someone, for instance, in the other case where someone was supposed to have pocketed 35,000 cedis and the person comes for a plea bargain, did I want to see someone who pocketed 35,000 go to jail for, let's say, 5 or 8 years, when the person had offered something in the region of 200,000 that we can take and give to the state? The discretion by the law, I was way too happy to get 200,000 instead of 35,000 cedis for the Republic. I think the Republic benefited a lot from that case by way of that amount. So a lot of considerations go in considering whether it should go to full trial. Sometimes even the law says that the information a person offers, if it is going to fetch you much more well-versed suspects, you could cut the person that slack because of the value of that information. But it also depends on what the person is suspected to have done. Any other question? Oh, thank goodness there's no other question. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm a commodity. So, we can all go for supper. Thank you for coming. We are most grateful. Anytime we call upon you, you show up. Have a good evening.